In our homes, nothing got thrown away. Not one thing. A single chicken fed a family for 4 days. A flour sack became a dress. Bacon grease was saved in a can on the stove. And even yesterday's bread came back to the table as dessert. They called us poor. But what our people did in that house, the world is only now starting to call genius. I spent weeks with church recipe books and more than 200 first-hand accounts from folks who lived it. What I found wasn't poverty. It was strategy. Number 19 started out as what other people threw in the trash, and today it costs $20 a plate. Number 14 came, literally, out of a flour sack. And number 5, you won't believe. A whole family lived on what you'd spend today on a single dinner. These 25 tricks almost disappeared for good because nobody teaches them anymore. And number 1 isn't even a trick. It's the idea that made the other 24 work. For years, they told us that saving everything was something poor folks did. But our people knew something the whole world is rediscovering today. Number 25. 1 chicken, all week long. The queen of that kitchen was the Sunday hen. It was roasted whole and served with rice or beans. But here's where the magic began. The broth never got thrown out. On Monday, the leftover meat went into sandwiches. On Tuesday, that broth came back as soup. On Wednesday, the bones were boiled again for Thursday's beans. 1 chicken gave 4 to 6 meals, not a dinner, but a plan for the whole week. But a chicken was a whole cut of meat. The next trick was for when there was barely any at all. Number 24, the meat stretcher. When there was only a pound of meat for the whole family, you didn't serve less. You stretched it. They called it the meat stretcher. And the rule was simple. 1 part meat, 2 or 3 parts filler. You can still see those hands in the bowl. The ground meat, the rice, the bread soaked in milk, all worked together until a pound went as far as 3. Beans with a little bacon, a full plate. It wasn't scarcity. It was kitchen math. And there was 1 pot that didn't go cold for 7 days. Number 23, the Sunday pot. On Sunday, a giant pot got cooked, gumbo, stew, something with a good broth, and that pot ran the whole week. But you didn't eat it the same 2 days in a row. Monday, as it was. Tuesday, thickened with a little flour. Wednesday, with more vegetables, it was a different dish. Thursday, soup. Friday, the last of it with an egg, became hash. The same pot, 5 different dinners. The whole idea fit in a phrase many remember from their mamas. Nothing gets thrown out. Everything gets made into something else. And that same law rescued even the hardest, most forgotten piece of bread. The one you'd toss today without thinking twice. Number 22. Old bread was never trash. Hard bread was never thrown out. It was cut into cubes, left to soak in milk with egg, sugar, and cinnamon, and baked. Bread pudding, a dessert out of nothing. Stale cornbread was eaten in cold milk with honey, and bread dipped in egg and fried in butter became French toast. Yesterday's bread wasn't a problem. It was tomorrow's dessert. But all of this makes more sense when you see what things cost back then. Number 21. What it cost to fill the pantry. Here are the numbers, and they tell a story. In 1965, a pound of rice cost 12 cents. 5 pounds of flour, 55 cents. A pound of chicken, 39 cents. A dozen eggs, somewhere between 24 and 64 cents, depending on the year. Sounds like a gift, until you remember that a whole week's pay was small too. That's why every penny had to stretch, just like that pound of meat. They didn't cook cheap, because food was cheap. They cooked that way because they knew exactly what every coin was worth. At the counter, coin purse in hand, you counted every penny twice before you let it go. That instinct started at the cast iron skillet and ran all the way down to the last drop of grease the bacon gave up. That's where we turned into gold, what the store threw in the trash. Number 20, the can on the stove. In just about every one of our kitchens, there was a can nobody ever threw out. The bacon grease can. Many remember it as an empty coffee can. Maxwell House, Folgers, sitting right by the burners. Every morning after the bacon was fried, that grease was strained, covered, and left there, creamy and white, ready to go back on the fire. With it, you seasoned the collard greens and the beans, greased the skillet, made the biscuits, and the gravy. It wasn't waste. It was the flavor of the whole house. But if the grease other people threw away was worth gold, imagine what we did with the meat nobody else wanted. Number 19, eating low on the hog. This one we have to say slowly. During slavery and the years that followed, other people kept the best cuts, the loin, the chops, the breast. Our people got what was left over, neck bones, oxtails, ham hocks, pig feet, chitlins, what others called scraps. But look what happened. With 6 hours of slow cooking, onion, garlic, vinegar, and a seasoning you can't learn from any book, those low cuts became the most loved dishes on the table. Today, what nobody wanted is served as a plate of pride. Oxtails cost $20, and chitlins have their own festival. We didn't eat the pig's leftovers. We turned them into the best plate in the house. But not even a bare bone got thrown out, because out of it came something that changed everything. Number 18, the broth that came from the bones. Nothing with a bone got thrown out. Ham bones, the Sunday chicken carcass, the bacon rind, it all went into a container until there was enough. Then into the big pot with water, bay leaf, and pepper to simmer low all afternoon. Out of it came a broth that changed everything. The beans, the rice, and the greens had a depth that plain water never gave. It said a mother could get 3 meals out of bones anybody else would have tossed. And there was one night a week when that ingenuity really shined. The dinner, where nobody knew what they were eating. Number 17, the leftover dinner. Many families had a set day, Friday, for what they called scrap dinner, the leftover dinner. Everything left in the icebox came out and got put back together. Yesterday's rice with egg and onion became fritters. The meat got chopped into hash. But here was the art. Nobody at the table knew they were eating Tuesday's leftovers. Everybody finished with a clean plate. Because you were taught that throwing out food was disrespect, waste not, want not, and that same mind stretched something harder still, the clothes that had to dress 3 or 4 children. Number 16, the clothes that passed down from child to child. In our homes, a child almost never got something brand new. Clothes came down from the oldest to the youngest, then crossed over to the cousins, the neighbors, the church. A single shirt could dress 5 or 6 children before it died. But hand-me-downs weren't shame. Before it went to the next set of arms, the hem was let down. A button was changed. A patch went on the knee. And even when it came used, it was washed and pressed like it was new. They said, if it still fit, it was still good. But first, you had to make it last. And for that, every house had an art almost nobody practices today. Number 15, the needle that saved everything. Every house had its sewing basket, thread, a worn thimble, a jar of buttons rescued from dead clothes. A sock with a hole wasn't tossed. You slipped a wooden egg inside and darned it. When a shirt collar wore out, it was unstitched and flipped, and the worn part hid on the inside. So it lived another year. And at night, under the lamp, many remember their mother sewing by the old treadle singer. A stitch in time saved 9. But of all the cloth that passed through those hands, there was one that turned need into something beautiful, and it came out of a flour sack. Number 14, the dress born from a flour sack. Here's one of the most beautiful secrets of those years. Flour, sugar, and feed came in cotton sacks, and our mothers turned them into dresses, shirts, and sheets. It took about 3 sacks for one dress. But look what happened. The companies caught on, so they started printing pretty patterns, flowers, checks, polka dots, knowing the women would sew them, and families picked the brand of flour by the fabric. You washed out the logo, added a ribbon, and nobody at church would have guessed that dress started as a flour sack. That wasn't poverty. It was making beauty out of what others called trash. And that beauty had a sacred destination, Sunday. Number 13, the Sunday best. During the week, clothes were for work, mended, handed down. But on Sunday, the whole house changed. Every family kept its Sunday best, the finest clothes, saved just for church. The pressed suit, the shoes shined on Saturday, the white gloves, and the crowns. Those church hats the women wore, with flowers and feathers, the most dignified thing that ever came through a church door. It didn't matter how tight money had been. On Sunday, before God and the community, our people showed up with their heads high. That clothing could last 10 years. Dignity didn't depend on the budget, and that same instinct ruled all the way down to the last empty jar in the house. Number 12, the empty jar that never was. In our kitchens, an empty jar wasn't trash. It was a container waiting on its second job. The Hellman's mayo jar came back to the table as a drinking glass. The peanut butter jar held the sugar, and the coffee cans, Maxwell House, Folgers, were the catch-all. Nails, buttons, coins through a slot in the lid. The margarine tubs, country crock, parquet, were the Tupperware of the day. In one, you'd send food to a neighbor, and it came back full of something else. You opened the pantry, and there they were, in rows, all different. The glass clinking with that soft clink, and the old labels half worn off. An empty container was the start of something. But if glass and metal had 1,000 lives, there was a paper thing that had even more. Number 11, the newspaper that did everything. The newspaper was read front to back, and then its real life began. Crumpled up, it left the windows without a streak. It wrapped the fish, lined the drawers, lit the stove. And when a child came in with soaked shoes, you stuffed paper inside. It dried the damp and held the shape. What's more, when the sole had a hole, a sheet inside kept the cold off the foot until there was money for new shoes. The Sunday paper was saved for the whole week. Not a scrap of that paper went to waste. And even the last sliver of soap, the one you can't even hold anymore, had a second life waiting. Number 10, neither soap nor a rag got thrown out. The last slivers of soap were melted into a new bar or slipped into a nylon stocking to use to the very end. Clothes that no longer fit anybody were cut into rags, washed, boiled, and used again because paper towels were a luxury that didn't belong in that house. And the apron was the most versatile tool of all. It dried hands, carried vegetables from the garden, pulled the hot pan from the oven. Even the water got a second life. The wash water scrubbed the porch. The vegetable water fed the plants. Nothing went down the drain without working twice. And all of this lived next to a few brands any one of you will recognize in a heartbeat. Number 9. The brands that lived in every house. A box of Arm & Hammer baking soda did it all. Scrubbed the dishes, whitened the laundry, took the smell out of the icebox, and even worked as toothpaste. The blue Crisco can, once empty, held nails or coins. And the jar of blue magic for the hair, that blue tub with the gold lid, with that sweet smell that stayed on your fingers, later held pins or homemade salve. Many also remember ivory soap and octagon. And in every kitchen, there was a sacred drawer, the one for anything that might come in handy. Rubber bands, string, folded paper bags, the bread twist ties, half-burned candles. Every object had a second and a third life. Nothing got thrown out. And that wasn't poverty. It was respect for what you had. But stretching things was only half of it. The other half was stretching $1. And there, a single paycheck did what seems impossible today. Number 8. The envelopes on the kitchen table. On payday, in a lot of houses, the money didn't go to the bank. It went to the kitchen table. There, almost always the mother, sat with the pay, a pencil, and a handful of envelopes, each one with a name written by hand: rent, food, light, clothes, burial. And the first one, always, was for the church. Every bill got divided out, and the rule was sacred. When an envelope was empty, that expense was over. You didn't steal from another. Many kept those envelopes tucked in the pages of the family Bible, safe under the faith. They had no app, no spreadsheet. They had discipline, a pencil, and their word. But sometimes the pay didn't reach the next payday, and for that, there was another system. Number 7. Layaway, credit, and the coin jar. When you had to buy something big, the coat, the Christmas toys, there were no credit cards. You put it on layaway. The store held the item in the back. You paid little by little, no interest, and you walked out with a little receipt in your hand, and the pride of knowing that gift was already yours. The day you finished, you took it home. It wasn't debt. It was patience. And between paydays, the corner grocer wrote down in his book what you took, and you paid on payday. All on your word. Meanwhile, every bit of change fell into a jar on top of the icebox. For Christmas or an emergency. You bought with discipline, not debt. But the most powerful savings didn't fit in a jar. It lived in the trust between neighbors. Number 6. The SUSU, the bank that was the people. Here's something to say with pride. When the bank shut the door on our people, they built their own bank. They called it a SUSU, an inheritance that crossed the ocean from West Africa and the Caribbean. A group of trusted neighbors put in a set amount every week, and by turns, each one took the whole pot. 10 people, $10, and somebody went home with 100. No paperwork, no interest, no bank. And the church did the same with its funds. For a burial, for a widow, for a family that lost everything. The only contract was your word, and breaking it was worse than any legal punishment. We didn't wait for the bank to open its door. We loaned to each other. And all of this served one nearly impossible mission. Number 5. What a single paycheck had to do. Here's the number that changes everything. It said that many working families lived on barely $60 or $75 a week. And on that one paycheck, 6, 7, even 8 people were fed, clothed, and sheltered. Out of it came the rent, the food, the light, the clothes, the tithe, and something for emergencies. Many remember a mother who did the week's shopping for less than a dinner cost today. It wasn't that money was left over. It never was. It was that every penny knew where it was going. Because the lesson wasn't how much you earn, but how you manage it. And that wisdom didn't stop at the wallet. It went out to the backyard, where the biggest secret of all was hidden. Number 4, the yard that fed the house. Behind just about every house was something we'd paid dearly for today. Free food. A garden with collard greens, tomatoes, beans, and okra. Hens that gave fresh eggs every morning, and when an old one stopped laying, she went in the pot. It's said that in season, up to 70% of the family's vegetables came from that yard. And the neighborhood trees belonged to everybody. If you had a fig tree, the neighbor came to pick, and you went for his pecans. Picking a sun-warmed tomato wasn't work. It was abundance. But summer doesn't last, so you had to catch that abundance before the cold came. Number 3, the jars that beat the winter. The sweltering afternoons of August, with the kitchen boiling, had a sacred purpose: canning. Tomatoes, peaches, jams, and pickles went into mason jars, ball and cur, boiled until they sealed. And then came the most satisfying sound of summer, the metal pop of the lid, sealing under vacuum, while the jars cooled on the towel. Those jars went down to the cellar in rows of red, amber, and green. Many remember it as insurance against hunger. A full pantry was the quiet proof that the family would make it through the winter. But not everything came from the garden. Part came from something older still. Number 2, what the land gave for free. Before protein came wrapped in plastic, it came from the river and the woods. The men and the boys went out at dawn to fish for catfish and came back with the dinner the current gave them. You hunted rabbit, squirrel, deer. And in the fields, women and children filled buckets with berries, their hands and mouths stained purple. But look what happened next. What you brought home, you shared. If a neighbor was sick or had run into bad luck, part of the fish, part of the game reached them. It wasn't just food. It was a community taking care of itself. And in that act of sharing, the secret that held up the other 24 things starts to show. Because number 1 isn't a trick. It's the reason all the others existed. Number 1, and it isn't a trick. It's a truth. Nothing you've seen was poverty. Think about it, and you'll understand why everything else worked. Your grandmother didn't save the bacon grease because she was poor. She saved it because she knew that nothing God gives you goes to waste. Your great-grandfather didn't mend his own shoes because he had no money. He mended them because pride has no price. And your family didn't put on their Sunday best to impress anybody. They dressed that way because showing up before God and the community with dignity was the least you could do. The 24 tricks weren't loose tricks. They were branches of one same tree. And the root was this: ingenuity, faith, discipline, and community. It wasn't about surviving. It was about living with dignity. That wasn't poverty. It was wisdom. What was lost wasn't the money. It was the habit of caring for what we had and caring for each other. And here's what really disappeared. It wasn't the grease or the garden or the jars in the cellar. What left was a way of seeing the world, that everything you have deserves respect, and that no family survives alone. The throwaway culture taught us to buy again what we used to save. Easy credit replaced the coin jar, and each of us ended up in our own house, buying back what the neighbor used to lend us. They didn't have much, but they had everything. So tonight, pick one thing off this list and bring it back. Start a coin jar. Save the grease. Sew on a button. Just one. And tell me in the comments 2 things. Which one you're bringing back, and which one you remember from your own childhood. Because every memory you write down there is exactly what this video is trying to save.